And I remember last year when Alan Mosley was the chairman of this, we were all nervous about would Venture Atlanta really take off. I don't think there's any question this year about whether Venture Atlanta is a success or not. And I really want to thank a lot of people who helped make this possible, from the CEO High Tech Council, Ashish Mistry. Ashish, I know you're here somewhere. Where are you? Please stand up. Tino Mandello from TAG, if you would, and David Hartnett from the Metro Atlanta Chamber. And of course, Mark Johnson for refereeing all of the things that had to be decided to make sure this was possible. Thank you very much, Mark, for what you're doing as well. The Metro Atlanta Chamber is extremely supportive of what this Venture Forum stands for. We are very committed to the high technology and to the life science, bioscience industry. In fact, we have recently, with the leadership of Tom Noonan and John Yates, created a new economy task force to look in how can we better support and grow organically as well as recruit new high-tech companies to Metro Atlanta. In parallel to that, Dr. Lawrence Downey, formerly of Solvay, and Dr. Carl Patton, retired from Georgia State University, are chairing our Bioscience Council to advise us of the same types of things. So we are really committed, and we are so proud to see the VC opportunity here, because I think that's been one of our challenges all along. Well, I've got the honor of introducing our guest speaker today, and instead of looking at his official bio, I did a little bit of work on Google and Wikipedia and other places. You can find a lot of things about people these days. I won't tell them all, Jeff. But Jeff Sprecher is the kind of person, as Mayor Shirley Franklin would say, you do us proud. Interestingly enough, he had never set foot on a trading floor until 1995. This is a news article. After graduating as a chemical engineer from the University of Wisconsin, he moved to California to sell industrial turbines. He left the job after completing an MBA at Pepperdine University, where he learned about federal regulations that opened the public electricity grid to private firms. At 27, Sprecher co-founded the Western Power Group, which entered the power plant business courtesy of a separate 1980s innovation. Michael Milken had created the junk bond, Sprecher explained, and as a young kid, I was able to go to Wall Street and borrow money in what to me were huge amounts, basically using it as mortgages to build power plants. ICE, or Intercontinental Exchange here, is in Atlanta, headquartered here, and it's expanded into global markets for agriculture, chemicals, credit default swaps, emissions, energy, equity indexes, and foreign exchange. Recently, I would mention I was with Richard Anderson at Delta and Bob Fernaro at Airtran, both of whom said, we really don't think ICE is a very good thing. It drives up fuel prices. I'm sure, and Jeff was explaining there are some members of Congress that think that too, but that's people that buy and sell drive up prices, not those that manage the information. But they have maintained a tremendous focus of discipline, and I also want to recognize the other ICE executives that are here this morning. Thank you all for coming. You can see whether Jeff followed your remarks later. He has won accolades from Business Week, Institutional Investor, and numerous industry publications. Ernst & Young made him the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2002. Market Watch said he was one of the 5 finalists for the CEO of the Year. Wall Street Journal named ICE the #1 stock of the year in 2006. I mean, these aren't things you can make up, There's got to be some truth underneath this, Jeff. But I think the great thing is when Enron went bankrupt in 2001, ICE served as the major benefactor by recouping much of its online business and saw volumes spike to record levels. Anybody here used to work with Merritt? Remember that name? Not to mention Enron. More importantly, by supplanting Enron during its troubles, Sprecher's Little Atlanta startup, I like that phrase, served as the savior of an unsettled energy market at a time of crisis. In 2005, when ICE went public, It was the largest IPO in Georgia's history. That's another, you're really building some credibility there. And it's incredible what has been happening with this company. ICE now trades 50% of the world's global crude oil. That's why Delta loves you so much. I think that when you add all of these things together, you really begin to see something of the complexity. But I think also if you look back, read some other things, you understand the character of the person who started all this. And here's an article I've dug up. In car racing, it's called the bump and run. The car on the tail of the lead car bumps it from the rear end, causing it to lose traction. And in that instant, the catch-up car driver hits the accelerator and vaults to the lead. Now, you don't know, but Jeff used to race cars in the 1980s. It said he never bumped and ran, but he never won either. But in business, his Intercontinental Exchange is now gunning to push aside much larger rivals. At stake is a financial market valued at trillions of dollars. To hear him tell it, all he did was find the right place in the pack, spot an opening, and step on the gas. Welcome our guest speaker, Jeff Sprecher.
That was lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you. Gee, well, thanks, Sam. That certainly wasn't prepared by my staff. So I appreciate you doing the homework. And you really do, and your colleagues do really wonderful things for the city, so I appreciate being introduced by you. I understand that last year at this podium was Bernie Marcus who gave the address to you all, and so I've had the privilege of meeting him. In fact, I sat next to him, I think last week at a lunch. And I know that he doesn't so much as speak as he commands attention and respect. And he and Arthur Blank and Ken Langone have built, an amazing company that's been phenomenal for the city of Atlanta. And one of the amazing things about that company that I think a lot about is that at the end of the day, these were people that just said we could do a better hardware store. And I want to talk a little bit about starting companies. I've done a couple, as Sam mentioned in my introduction, and I've learned a few things. Running a business takes capital, as we all know, and many of you are here today because you're seeking financial capital. You also are trying to attract intellectual capital and human capital. But the capital that is even rarer and is the thing that many of us in this room admire is entrepreneurial capital. And like other types of capital, entrepreneurial capital will flow towards the opportunities and the organizations that offer the highest potential return. And I've had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to start businesses. As Sam mentioned, not many people actually know about our company, although I think we're ranked about the 8th largest company in Georgia at this point in time. We have just under $1 billion in revenue and a $7 billion market cap. But in year 2005, I was able to recognize what is a dream for most entrepreneurs, and that is that I was able to ring the bell on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange on the day that we took the company public. And I know NYSE Euronext is one of your sponsors, and they are an exchange like ICE, and we're peers with them, and I think quite highly of them, and it was an incredible honor to be listed on their exchange. And so with that background of me and what we've done here locally, I thought, if you'll indulge me today, I'm trying to think about what I could say to this group, and I really thought the best thing I could do was speak to some of the early stage entrepreneurs in the audience. And many of you are here to support these early stage entrepreneurs, and if you'll indulge me to allow me to talk to them and give some advice about the things that I've seen in my career, most of which has been building companies, I hope it'll be interesting for you, at least to get you through to dessert. So one of the things in starting a company, if you don't mind, I'm going to I feel kind of awkward behind a podium, so I'm going to walk over here and tell the audio guy if you could turn this mic on, it would be helpful. One of the things that I've done in my career is think about the various attributes that would make a business successful. And the very first thing that I eventually do when we were building and starting companies is I actually develop an escape plan. I develop a plan on how we will fail. And the reason that we do that is not because I've read about it in a textbook or learned about it in college, but I've had many experiences in my life where we were taking risk, and I would literally, at that moment in time when you're laying in bed and you're just about to fall asleep and you're kind of half conscious, I would have this unbelievable fear come over me, literally like a panic. I would feel myself moving back and forth in the bed with my heartbeat. I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. And I would have just dozens of irrational thoughts of fear and failure come through me to the point that I couldn't sleep. I would get up. I'd literally go in and sit on the sofa, turn on the infomercials, watch them, endlessly, try to lay down on the couch, fall back asleep, and invariably end up staying awake that night. And so one of the things that I learned that really allows me to get through life and take risk in building companies is to develop this plan for failure. And literally what I do every time we take a risk, certainly I did it when we were in the startup phase, but I still even do it today as we take risk, is I think about consciously what will happen if this doesn't work out and how will we survive. And in the case of starting a new business, I would think about how will I pay the rent? How much rent do I need before I can find another job? Who are the people that depend on me and how can I take care of them? Who will I turn to for a job? What can I actually do? What skills do I have? How quickly would it take me to find a job? Who could I borrow money from? What would I say to my family? What would I say to my detractors that had all along said that we shouldn't be taking this risk? And after developing that plan, what I tend to do is I take that and I put it in a vault and I forget about it. And by virtue of literally having that plan, it tends to emotionally free you to take risk because you know you've got this base and this foundation that you can turn to. And ICE was founded in year 2000. It was not necessarily an accident that year 2000 was the year we were founded. If you recall, we had the millennium, and New Year's Eve of the year 2000 was an incredible time. There were television shows leading up to it. People were doing retrospectives of the last decades and centuries. People talking about what we were going to have in the future, what we were going to see. And it was a time of great introspection. And for me, I had been toiling and trying to start what is today IntercontinentalExchange. And I literally made a New Year's resolution that this company was either going to be a boy or a girl. And I didn't care, but one way or another, we were going to make it succeed or I was going to bolt and shut it down. And by February of 2000, we had basically put the business together, got partners, and launched the company. And the reason was that over that New Year's, I made my plan to fail. One of the things that we did is we gave away, I was the 100% owner of the company at that time, and I gave away 80% of the company. So for you entrepreneurs in the room, I gave away 80% of the company for zero. But I gave equity interest to people that we hoped would become our major customers. And in exchange for that, got their loyalty and got their business and built a company around that. We have been a beneficiary of the second thing that I want to point out to early stage entrepreneurs, and that is that we have been riding trends. In my introduction was mentioned that I was a power plant developer and I'd started a company right out of business school, and there was a trend there that the law had been changed to allow private companies to own utility-grade power plants. In the case of IntercontinentalExchange, we're riding a globalization trend. We're a platform for trading commodities, and it just so happens that there's an unbelievable demand being put on the global economic system for commodities as we've had the BRIC countries grow. And it coincides with a globalization trend that people need to access, buy and sell commodities, and we happen to do it via technology using the internet. And as a result of that trend has driven our business. And so in looking back at my career and thinking about what advice I could give to people, take a look at the trends around you. And, you know, the obvious trend that's going on today, as we all sit here in this room, is an incredible stress, particularly on the U.S. economy. And in times of stress like this, there are tremendous opportunities that are being created right here. And for those of you in the room that can spot those opportunities and act on them to help people out of stress and relieve their stress, you will end up building great companies. Another thing that I've learned that isn't obvious to a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet is to think big. I'm often, for some reason, and you can probably tell if you look at me in profile, my wife and I eat at a lot of restaurants as part of the job of being a public company CEO, and we're out a lot, and people come up and are constantly asking us to invest in new restaurants. And I you know, enjoy being with entrepreneurs, so I always will take the meeting and talk about the restaurant. And invariably, I ask the chef or manager, you know, about their vision for the restaurant, and they tell me. And I always ask them, you know, how many restaurants are you going to build? And they say, oh, one, and, you know, if it's successful, maybe we'll go out to Alpharetta and build number 2. And I always come back and say, look, it's very, very hard to raise money in life, and you all are in the business of either helping people to do that or asking for money, and you know it's very, very difficult. It's actually much easier to raise a lot of money for a very meritorious goal than it is to raise a tiny amount of money for a small goal, and that's been my experience. And as Sam mentioned, when I was a young kid, I you know, was meeting with Michael Milken, and I had this profound experience. I was in my 20s, I was renting, and I wanted to buy a condominium. And I think it was a $95,000 condominium, and I had $15,000 down, and I wanted to borrow $80,000 in a mortgage. It was a very robust housing market. The condominium was obviously good collateral against the mortgage, and I was having an unbelievably difficult time getting a mortgage. I went and had a meeting with Michael, and I told him I wanted to borrow $50 million for my business. And he said to me, why don't we go for 100? And I had I had no collateral, a big idea, and a plan, but here's a guy on Wall Street that says I can give you 100, and my friggin' mortgage broker wouldn't even help me get this condominium. So I learned very early in life that, you know, think big, have a big idea. If this restaurant that somebody wants to open is going to work in this neighborhood, how many other neighborhoods like this are there? I was living in California for most of my adult life, and I remember when Wolfgang Puck opened the restaurant Spago. And Spago, although Wolfgang Puck today has a big reputation and a high-flying chef, Spago was a little dump at the time. It was a tiny little restaurant, and you would literally go in and sit on chairs that he would buy at Home Depot. They were $10 lawn chairs. And the food, however, was amazing. And one of the things that Wolfgang Puck created, which was incredibly innovative at the time, was he had a tiny little pizza, an individual pizza that he sold as an appetizer that had cream cheese on it and smoked salmon. And that was, at the time, you know, an unbelievably avant-garde dish. And here these two friggin' dentists that live in the neighborhood would go over there for lunch, and they decided that they really liked that pizza. But I think that thing at the time was about $12. And they said, it would be great if we could buy that little pizza but only pay like $4 or $5 or $6. And I bet our colleagues would all like that pizza too, but they can't afford to eat at Spago the way we can because we're dentists. At the time, dentists used to earn a lot of money, by the way, for the public plan and everything else that we have going on. But in any event, these guys took that pizza and went out and created California Pizza Kitchen. Now, these are dentists, for crying out loud, that took another guy's idea, but they thought big. They thought about how to take this thing and ride a trend. And what was the trend? In the 80s, we were all becoming individuals. It was the me generation, and the idea that you would have your own pizza and would have fancy toppings on it was a real innovation. And today they've built an amazing chain. So the point I make there is think big. I just gave an example of guys that did it with pizza and hardware. So you don't have to split the atom. What you have to do is think big, think creatively, and those ideas, in my mind, attract capital and professionals. Another thing I realize about entrepreneurs, and I think I have this to a degree, and my colleagues that have helped me build ICE, is that I think entrepreneurs generally embrace change better than many people. And the thing that you should do is recognize that is an attribute that you have if you're an entrepreneur. I'm really convinced that all of us in this room hate change. I think human beings hate change. We all get comfortable, and we all like what we're doing, and nobody really wants big change. And in fact, probably the debate that we're having right now in Congress is about changing health care. Half the debate is just about we don't understand it and we're scared of it. When I was a kid, I was an avid reader of Forbes magazine. And Malcolm Forbes at the time was the publisher, and I would read that magazine cover to cover every issue for years. And there's an article that was in there that I remember reading when I was probably about 20 years old that still stays with me to this day, and I want to describe it to you. There was an article about how people that had suffered near-death experiences, where they had literally died on an operating table and had been revived. And a study was done about what was the common experience there. And generally speaking, people would see a white light, and they would have these moments of their life flash in front of them. And they would replay key moments in their lives as they were losing their life. And Malcolm Forbes, in this article, asked the question, if you think about you putting yourself in that position, what are the 10 moments in your life that you think you will recall? And amazingly, they were all moments of profound change for most people. They were the birth of a son. They were your first kiss, your first date, the loss of your child or parent. They were moments that define your life as moments of change. And so the takeaway there is, we all resist change, but at the end of the day, when really put to the ultimate test, those are the moments that we tend to cherish and embrace. As an entrepreneur, as you go through building your business, if you think about how you're going to take risk and how you're going to change your own life, and think about embracing that, the reality is you will be so much better off than the people that you're competing with. That alone, I think, will allow you to basically outmaneuver incumbents and others. Along that line, as people approach me for help in starting businesses, I get a lot of business plans, and I get a lot of plans where, amazingly, the entrepreneur who's building this company has calculated how much capital they need to start the business, and it just amazingly turns out that they need to sell 49% of the company, and the entrepreneur will keep 51%. And when people show me these business plans where they're a 51%er, I tend to go kind of negative. So now I'm going to talk the book of the venture capital guys that are in the room here. I mentioned I gave away 80% of my company, and I had the capital to do that, and so I'm not an advocate for trying to hold on to 51%. But to me, as a leader of a company and as investing in future leaders, I want to invest with people because I trust them. I want to invest in people whose ideas I share. If you ask the entrepreneur, why do you want to own 51%, they'll invariably tell you, well, I need to have control. And then your mind always goes, why do you need to have control? I just gave you my money. I trust you. You don't need to control me. Well, what if something goes wrong? You might fire me. Well, what if something goes wrong? You might deserve to be fired. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you're getting into this startup business for job security, you are making a Terrible mistake. Job security is not what anyone in this room is here to work on. This is about calculated risk-taking. As you're raising capital, and as many of you are presenting here and going to talk to the professionals in the room, ask for help from the best people you can find. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I always meet people who says, you know, my brother-in-law is an accountant and he can do the books at night, okay? Look around here. There are some actual real accountants that actually build companies that understand Sarbanes-Oxley, that can prepare you to go public. There are lawyers in this room. There are venture capitalists who have built businesses, and they're all here to help you. Your brother-in-law, I'm sure, will dig in his pocket, but you don't need to go there first. All of us in the room, I think it's an American trait, we want to help the underdog. We want to put our capital and our investment and our friendships with people that are going someplace. We all like, you know, you're driving the bus. We want to go for a ride. And as you seek out these professionals, and I'm telling you, entrepreneurs in the room, you can deal with the best lawyer on Wall Street. You can talk to the New York Stock Exchange. You can, these people are available to you. And when you seek them out, be honest with them. I've had the great pleasure of working with some fabulous people, and I've had to say to them, I can't afford you. Okay? I can't afford $800 an hour. I'm a startup. And people understand that. And you know what happens? Sometimes people will say, fine, I'll sell my services for nothing. I'll take stock in your company. Or you know what? I've got a young protege that I'm trying to teach to learn the business. I'll put him or her on your account, and I'll mentor them. You'll get my knowledge, but you won't have to pay my rate. And so I would urge you to look for the best people around. Many of them, I'm sure, are in this room. Take their business cards. If you don't do a deal with them today, think about them and seek them out. It's literally how I've helped build many businesses. I want to talk about how you hire good people, because good companies are simply just collections of good people. And I'm going to embarrass one of my colleagues here today. Edwin Marcial is here. He's our Chief Technology Officer. And for those that don't know my company, we literally are on the cutting edge of technology. Because we run a trading platform that trades oil, we have Wall Street has algorithmic trading engines that are hooked to us that literally are reading news electronically. And when a missile goes off in the Middle East, the price of oil will spike before you and I can even hear a CNN story that does that. And those are computers trading with computers. And they put unbelievable stress on our systems, and they're all around the world. We have computers and people trading in 60 different countries that simultaneously talking to us. We are on the leading edge of network design. We work very closely with IBM, with Cisco, with Juniper, people like that. We can no longer use standardized equipment. We need to have highly optimized optical equipment to move bits and bytes around the world. And Edwin, my Chief Technology Officer, has won many awards, has worked with the best people in the industry, and is widely regarded as one of the top Chief Technology Officers in the United States, certainly here in Atlanta, and he's won awards for that. And I'm going to tell you the story about how you hire the top Chief Technology Officer. I had this idea that ultimately became ICE. I bought a little tiny company that was here in Atlanta, had 46 employees, and it was losing $1 million a month. And I bought it as an individual, and so the day I closed on it, I was losing $1 million of my own money every month. So I, was successful, but come on. So I had to move very quickly. And the first thing I did is we had a Black Friday where I walked in on the first day, introduced myself, and took the top management team off the company and told them goodbye. I took all the other employees, and I announced I'm the new owner of the company, caught them completely by surprise. I said, the old team is not here. I really could use your support. We got to move quickly. We've got to stave off the bleeding. I went into an office later that day, some guy's office that had left the company. I was sitting at a desk. There was a knock on the door. In comes Edwin. I don't know this guy from Adam. He says to me, I got to talk to you. I said,